Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of our Future Leaders Speaker Series. It's a privilege to be here on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We're very grateful for their stewardship of these lands. My name is Jen Duff, and I'm a member of the St. Paul's Future Leaders. We're a group of engaged young professionals who dedicate our time to raising awareness and funds for the St. Paul's Foundation. I am also the program director of the Maternity Center at St. Paul's Hospital and a very, very proud mama of a 2.5-year-old who's redheaded and very rambunctious. This afternoon, we are going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's transitioning to parenthood. And for many of you who are participating in today's events, you'll know that that comes with highs and lows and everything in between. And I'm really excited about the group of panelists that we brought together to speak with you this afternoon. I also have the privilege of being your host. So we're just going to spend a few minutes going through a few details, and then we're going to hand it over to the team. So we're going to kick things off with an awesome mocktail cocktail demonstration from our friends at the Kiefer Bar. A huge early thank you to our friends at Kiefer Bar. We couldn't have hosted this event without your support. Really excited to watch your demonstration. We're then going to introduce our panel of experts. And we're going to start our discussion on the on transitioning to parenthood, especially given the times of COVID. Elaine Young is with us to moderate, and we're really looking forward to an interactive session with you. And we're going to talk about how to ask questions. So firstly, you can submit your questions by typing them into the chat box. You can also upvote your questions by clicking a thumbs up. At the end of today's event, if you choose to, we are encouraging you to consider donating to purchasing a new bilirubin meter. Our clinical team uses this non-invasive device to determine the level of jaundice in our newborns. Ours is broken, and we're looking for a replacement and encourage you to donate funds if you choose to do so. And we have some awesome, fantastic door prizes. Everybody who is registered for today's event is eligible to win. We have an amazing dinner for 6 with wine pairings from the Vancouver Club. We have a dream nursery and new parent package, including a $500 crib donated by Stortcraft. We have virtual one-on-one prenatal and breastfeeding sessions offered by our clinical team here at St. Paul's. We have shoes for the entire family donated by Native Shoes. And we have a $50 gift card from our friends at Kiefer Bar. Once again, thank you to all of the people who generously contributed to today's event. So we're on a strict timeline, so we're going to wrap up everything by 5:30. And just a few more housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, but only the presenters and panelists are visible on the screen. Nobody else is on camera, and everybody is automatically muted. Just a reminder that when you registered for today's event, you gave us permission to send you emails, but you can easily unsubscribe if you choose to do so by going to the original email and clicking unsubscribe. And please, we really encourage you to ask your questions as the event goes on. We want to encourage a dialogue and a discussion, and we really want you to leave today's event with some really useful information. So hopefully everybody's worked up a thirst. Over to the Kiefer Bar to take it from here.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me okay. My name's Amber. I'm coming at you from inside the Kiefer Bar today. Thanks again for having us here. We're super excited to lend our support to St. Paul's Hospital. Anything we can do during this time. Like we said, we're on a really strict time schedule, so we're gonna blow through these cocktails pretty quickly. If you have questions later on or during the session, you can feel free to ask them in the chat. I can quickly browse up and answer them. But if you have questions for later on, I think my details will be sent out to the group. So feel free to send me an email or an Instagram message and I'll jump to them. So those of you who have a mojito kit or just want to take some notes for future, we're going to start with the mojito. You're going to want a nice tall glass, Collins style glass like this. In your cocktail kits, you would receive a small little bottle that had some instructions on it and some contents. If your bottle was empty, you have little baggies. You can put those into your bottle. This is your mojito mix. It's a blend of lime juice and a simple syrup. We're going to go straight into the glass, no shaking required for a mojito. So this is about 1.5 ounces or 45 milliliters. I've got one of these fancy dancy bartender's jiggers here. If you don't have that, you can use a set of tablespoons or a measuring cup. But I highly recommend, if you do make cocktails at home, to pick one of these up. They last a lifetime, and they're really kind of fun. Really step up your home bar. After you've added your mojito mix, you're going to add some of your mint. You'll have a nice big sprig here. What I like to do is rip off the bottom sprigs. So those are the ones we're going to use in the cocktail, and then we save the top, kind of the little shoots at the top for garnishing. So get a good chunk of them, probably somewhere between 6 and 8 leaves, and I like to give them just a gentle tear before we pop them in the glass. Might need a couple of sprigs worth, just pop those right in there. And now if you're using ice from your refrigerator, a lot of them have like a crushed ice function. Those are ideal. Mojitos are really, really tasty on over crushed ice. If you don't, you can use regular ice. I'm going to be using regular ice today. If you're using regular ice, you're just going to want to get a muddler or the back of a wooden spoon, or even just any old spoon will work just fine. And just give a couple gentle presses of the mint into your mojito mix. This is going to help to release all those delicious oils that are trapped inside the mint. You don't want to go too vigorously or too hard. We just want to wake it up. We don't want to bruise it too badly. Bruising it, you'll notice that the mint will turn black in your cocktail, and it's nice to have a nice green fresh mint in your cocktail. After you've done that, you can add your rum. Most of you will have a Bacardi white rum. Somebody nicked mine, so I'm doing Bacardi 4 today, a little bit older. Ideally, you want to use a white rum in a mojito. It is designed to be a light, refreshing cocktail. If we have any fans of Ernest Hemingway, it was one of his the cocktails that he drank in Cuba, in Havana, quite regularly. So next time you're browsing through one of his memoirs or one of his books, feel free to learn a little bit about the cocktail through some literature. So we're gonna add 2 ounces, sorry, I kind of jumped ahead there. We're gonna add 2 ounces of our rum right to the glass, 60 mils. There you are. And once we've got, that's all the contents, we're just gonna add some ice. Fill it up, as much ice as you can in there. You want a little bit of, oops, I want a little bit of room left to add our soda. I'll do that much, perfect. Get rid of that guy. And then you find a can of club soda. You can have mineral water, sparkling water will work fine as well, or a soda stream, even better. And we'll just add usually about 2 ounces or so. You can kind of eyeball it. If you like a longer drink, feel free to add a little bit more, kind of a little bit more temperance. If you have the Lumet, the non-alcoholic, this makes a great non-alcoholic cocktail as well. Lumet is a lovely non-alcoholic distilled product from Vancouver Island, so it's always great to support local if you can too. Then finally, all we want to do is, we've already pressed our mint, we're just going to stir to combine. If you're using crushed ice, this is a great opportunity to give it a little bit more of a vigorous churn. We don't want to do too much stirring because we want to preserve all those delicious bubbles from the soda water, but that's pretty much it. Voila, you have a mojito. To top it off, a couple of those delicious little fronds that you might have saved to the side. What I like to do is get a couple of them together, maybe 1, 2, 3, and just give them a little spank on the hand, just to wake them up. I'm not trying to punish them, just to wake them up. And then just into the top of your glass there. We drink with our eyes first, so you want a really, really bright, beautiful bouquet of mints. If you want, you can use a reusable straw or a biodegradable straw, or you can just get right in there and have a sip. Get your nose right in the mint. That's our mojito. If there are any questions, feel free to throw them up in the chat, but we'll quickly jump along to the old-fashioned. We started with very light, refreshing cocktail that kind of takes us from summer to fall, and now we'll move into the old-fashioned time-honored classic. This is a really simple cocktail, pretty much like the original cocktail. Cocktail's defined as spirit, sugar, bitters, and water, and this is the cocktail in its most simplest form. So what we've got in your kit, you'll find our old-fashioned mix. What we've done here is made it really easy for you by already combining the sugar, a little tiny bit of water, and bitters. So it's already perfectly balanced. You don't have to worry about adding too much or too little of anything there. What you're going to do is get your old-fashioned mix and a spoon. Again, like a teaspoon works just fine. And we're doing about somewhere between 5 and 7 milliliters just straight into your glass. If you wanted to, and you have a fancy Japanese mixing glass, you're welcome to use that as well. But this cocktail we're making at home, we can make it straight into the glass that we're going to be enjoying the cocktail out of. So about 5 or 7 mils, just straight into the bottom of the glass. Very simple. And then we're going to get our bourbon. You've got Maker's Mark bourbon in your cocktail kits there. Any bourbon will work. Any spirit really works. We make rum or tequila old fashions at the bar quite often. The classic is typically done with an American whiskey. And then 2 ounces of American whiskey, the Maker's Mark, into our cup. If we're doing okay for time, oh, yeah, hurry along, got a couple minutes left. And that's basically it. The only final ingredient that we need to worry about now is the water, which is coming from the ice. So we'll add cubes of ice into our cup. Now, if you had large cocktail cubes, you're welcome to use those as well. Those are great for maintaining the chill of the cocktail, but not letting it dilute too much. If you have smaller ice cubes with more surface area, it will dilute a little bit faster. Just have to enjoy it a little bit quicker, but still responsibly. So then we're going to stir it all up. If you have a nice slender bar spoon like this, you can work on your technique. If you don't, a chopstick works really well. Again, the back of a wooden spoon works really well as well. And depending on your ice, if you have large chunky ice, you'll want to stir it a little bit longer. If you have smaller ice cubes, like pillow kind of shaped ice that's coming from your freezer, you don't have to stir as long. You're going to get the dilution faster and it's going to chill down really quickly. You're going to look for about the liquid to kind of double in size. So we've got our old fashioned almost ready to go there. If you've got ice cubes that are kind of floating up in the glass, feel free to add a couple of more so that they don't rattle around and bump you too much in the tea. And then also in your cocktail kit, you would have found some nice pre-sliced orange twists. Be careful if you're doing these at home. They're a really good way to lose the top of a knuckle. Practice makes perfect. And what you want to do is you're going to grab it just by the wide edge here. And we want to express all those orange oils. So you're just going to pinch it gently across here, across the top of your cocktail. And if you're quiet, you can kind of hear the oils coming out. Or if you see the light, you can see the oils coming out. And that's it. You can start to probably smell those orange aromas coming through. I like to garnish it. Again, we're going to drink with our eyes first, is give it a nice twist and hold for a little while, and then it'll make a beautiful little spiral for you there. Right in the top of the cocktail. You'll also receive some French brandied cherries. If you have a nice cocktail skewer, you're welcome to skewer them, or you can put them, drop them straight into the drink for a little treat at the end of your cocktail. And that's your old fashioned. So cheers, guys. Thank you very much again for having me here again today. I hope you enjoy your cocktails.
Wow, thank you, Kiefer Bar. That was awesome. I'm going to order a few up for exactly 5:31 this evening. We're now going to hand things over to our moderator for this afternoon's panel, Elaine Young. Elaine is a senior communications specialist here at Providence Health Care, St. Paul's Hospital, and you may recognize Elaine for her years as a television reporter with Global News. Elaine is the proud mama of 2 daughters, Charlie and Addison. And while Elaine has already transitioned to parenthood, she's got lots of experience with transitioning to parenthood in a period of uncertainty. Addison was the first baby to receive a heart transplant at BC Children's Hospital in 2011. So over to you, Elaine.
Thanks so much, Jen. And I'm really happy and excited to be here today. I only wish that, you know, we were so savvy with Zoom and online when I became a mom for the first time. As Jen mentioned, Addison, my oldest daughter, needed a heart transplant when she was 3 weeks old. And one of the things with transplant recipients is they have to be on drugs to avoid rejection, but those drugs give you a compromised immune system. So my husband and I like to joke that we've been living in COVID times for 9 years, with the hand washing and the don't come over if you're sick signs and that kind of thing. So I know that it was very isolating and lonely, especially during that 1 year mat leave when I was basically at home by myself with a baby. So I think that's kind of what some of our new parents are going through right now. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But before we get into the educational and informational side of things, let's jump in with something a little bit fun. We're going to do a quick poll. So, which of these best describes your current situation? 1 or more children under the age of 5, or you have a baby on the way, no kids yet, but thinking about it, and I'm just here for the Kiefer Bar demo. So get right in there, submit your answers, and then we'll just give you a few seconds. I just want everyone to know that that spanking the mint thing, I think might be the highlight of my evening, my afternoon here. I didn't know you were supposed to spank mint, but thank you, Kiefer Bar, for sharing that very important information. All right, how are we doing with our responses? Okay, I think we're doing pretty good. Let's see, we've got a whole bunch of you have responded already. Let's give you guys a few more seconds. Don't forget also, if you have any questions as we're going, there's a great way for you to ask questions. There's a Q&A box at the bottom. You can also do a chat. So we want to make this as interactive as possible, as Jen mentioned. Okay, so let's see. We're supposed to be able to see these responses, but I don't see them. Oh, let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, so a lot of people here have kids, young kids under the age of 5, 19% baby on the way, and 14% yet, no kids yet, but thinking about it. But I love this, 13%, I'm just here for the Kiefer Bar demo. But if you mix those drinks really well, you might need to remember this information for 9 months from now. So you people should pay the most attention, I think. So I think that's a good way for us to get started. One of our sort of ideas is to open the conversation and have people share some of their personal stories. So first, we're going to welcome Ben Ruff. Ben is a director of corporate banking at BMO Capital Markets. He's a future leader, and as of February, a new dad. So like so many other people during the pandemic, obviously COVID has changed a lot of what he and his wife's expectations were of parenthood, especially the lack of community resources and support, and again, that isolation, which seems to be a key factor here. So Ben, if you would like to join us and share your story, please.
Yeah, thanks for that. As mentioned by Jen, I work for BMO Capital Markets as a director. I became involved with St. Paul's a number of years ago. I was really attracted to St. Paul's Foundation due to the work that it does with mental illness and drug addiction. At the time, I never imagined I would be talking about my own parenting experience, especially during a pandemic. Last 7 months have been very tough for us. I wish I could say things are better, but we still have challenges every day, and some days are better than others. I honestly don't know if it's harder for us than everybody else. I feel like it is, but I really don't know because a lot of people don't really talk about it. That's partly why I've decided to share my story today. Our son was born at the end of February, just before COVID really broke out in Canada. At the time, COVID had hit China and Europe, and my parents were actually meant to come and visit from Australia and spend some time here to help out. They were due to come at the 3-week mark, and when the pandemic started to break out, they decided to come a bit earlier in case it prevented them from traveling. Unfortunately, my father has heart disease, so he was advised not to travel at all. So my mum came, and she ended up arriving here when he was about a week old. And in hindsight, I'm really glad she did. So we had her for a couple of weeks, and then Australia issued a warning asking all residents to return back to Australia. So after just being here for a couple of weeks, my mum had to go back. And so what was really tough then is once she left, we really had no help. Luckily I work in an organization that supports parental leave, and I'd actually taken a month off. So at least during that period, I could support 100%. After that, so if you think about it, he was born, it was just ourselves, and then we had a couple of weeks with my mom, and then it was really just me and my wife. And after that, I was back to full-time work in the middle of a pandemic, working from home in one of the busiest kind of periods of my career. My mother-in-law, while she does live in British Columbia, she lives in Seychelles, and she's elderly, so she couldn't come and visit because she was worried about traveling on the ferry, etc. And, you know, we didn't want to increase her exposure to the virus either. You know, so basically, you know, we now had a newborn and we're in the middle of a pandemic. I was working really long hours with really no help. For me, I was either helping with the baby, cooking, cleaning, or working. There really wasn't a break. You know, I was on 24/7. There wasn't a lot of sleep. And this in itself created kind of relationship conflict. As I felt like on weekends, my wife would at least get a bit of a break when I'm helping out 100%. She could sleep in on the weekends. But, you know, really, I wasn't. You know, I was either working or I was working or supporting. So I just found that there was literally no break for me at any time in the day. You know, weekends, I don't, you know, I'd look forward to spending the time with my son on the weekends, but I was getting, I just wasn't getting any sleep, whether it was during the week or a weekend. All the typical support systems were gone or changed. There were initially no women's groups, and then eventually they were started up over Zoom, which is great in theory, but it's really hard to show a woman how to get a good latch over a video. And if you have social anxiety to start with, you know, meeting people over video conference is tough, and asking questions is even harder. So I just don't think for a lot of people that, you know, really was providing the forum that they needed. Even today, my wife hasn't met anyone new with a baby. You know, we're 7 months into it now. She had all these great expectations of what mat leave would be like, meeting other mothers in the area with young babies, and that just hasn't happened. Our son has only met one other young child, one of my friend's children. I mean, for me, I don't really understand why women's groups can't meet in parks at acceptable social distancing. I've heard that that's actually starting to happen now, which is, you know, I guess it's great, but we're about to come into fall and then winter. So, you know, good luck social distancing in the rain and the cold, right? And being outside. So, you know, one of the key things that, you know, I do really worry about is the long-term impact of the lack of social interaction will have on my son's social development. When he sees babies, he really does light up, and he's just not getting that interaction. You know, on top of everything, there is the worry and stress about COVID. You know, what's acceptable, what's not. There continued to be confusion over what was allowed. How many people can you have in your bubble? Is it safe to go to a supermarket? Can you meet people in parks? Can you have people over? And if you do, how many? And do you have to be outside? You know, different views between my wife and I around what is safe and what is acceptable as it related to the virus created further stress on the relationship. You know, I would say she's, you know, very risk adverse. You know, I'm, you know, by nature of my job, you know, it's about, you know, calculated risk taking. For the longest time, it was easy for my wife just to stay home and not get out. And, you know, that's not good on people's mental health. You know, eventually a nurse had to tell her that if you're careful, the risk of catching the infection can be minimized. And that it was more important for her mental health to get out and see people and talk to people. So, I mean, that's been positive since then. You know, today things are slightly better for us. You know, our son is now 7 months old. Around that, you know, he's sleeping and eating better, both of which have proved challenging at certain points this year. You know, but I mean, my wife still really struggles with sleep. It's 7 months on, and that's still probably the biggest challenge for her. You know, we have our bubble of friends. We have a really good outside area at our house for entertaining guests. And I'm so fortunate we moved out of a condo and into a place in November. But we do worry about a second wave. And that is potentially going to hit us as we're coming into winter. And then again, being confined to the indoors, significant restrictions and lack of social interaction. You know, so for me, you know, that's a bit of a synopsis of you know, of the last 7 months for us and some of the concerns we have on a go forward basis. You know, I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panel their views and perspectives on what people can be doing to try and manage stress anxiety postpartum from home during COVID when, you don't have the resources you typically would have and you're in a different environment. And also very interested to understand what people think the lack of social interaction could be on the children.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ben, for really being honest and being so candid with your situation. I think it's safe to say that anyone who's had a baby or who has kids, well, really anyone, a lot of the things that you've said, I think will resonate with all people, whether they have kids, don't have kids, are pregnant. So thank you. And hopefully we can get some of that conversation and some of the dialogue going with our amazing panel today. And so speaking of our panel, let's do a quick introduction. First, we have Dr. Judy Wolfe. She, and as I introduce you panelists, if you could just give a little wave so everyone knows that that's you, but the names are on the screen as well. So we made it really easy. Dr. Wolfe is the pediatric site head at St. Paul's Hospital and a professor with the Department of Pediatrics at UBC. She's also a consulting pediatrician at BC Children's Hospital. Next, we've got Dr. Robert Anderson, an obstetrician and gynecologist at St. Paul's and an OBGYN professor at UBC. Next is Dr. Suja Srikameswaran, a registered clinical psychologist with extensive experience helping pregnant and postpartum women address body image, eating, mood, relationship, and parenting issues. Andrea Firmani, registered nurse, clinical nurse educator, and a certified lactation consultant at St. Paul's Hospital. And last but not least, Erin Trelor, health coach, blogger, and founder of Raw Beauty Co., dedicated to helping women and girls become the healthiest, happiest, and most confident versions of themselves. So everyone's offering a slightly different perspective. So we're gonna go through with some questions first, but again, panelists, conversation, if you wanna jump in, raise your hands. And again, for our attendees, make sure you ask questions. You can have a chat with us as well, with all the options at the bottom of your screen. So Suja, let's first start with practical advice. What kind of practical advice can you offer to new parents at this especially challenging time?
I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much, Ben, for sharing your story. I think that's the first piece of practical advice is exactly what Ben has just done, which is sharing his experience. I think that we often expect that that first wanted child is going to be a love fest and it's going to be a whole community experience. And we say, yeah, we know we're going to be exhausted, but it's all going to be good. COVID, as well as, just our own expectations have really changed what that experience is like. And even without COVID, it's often not a love fest. Often our expectations and reality clash. And what we may notice is that, in fact, we feel tired, irritated, angry, disappointed, sad, afraid. Every single challenging emotion that you can imagine, I think, comes up. And so one of the things in terms of self-help that I'd have us really pay attention to is the contrast between those expectations and reality. I think that's when we suffer, is when those two things don't match up. And so by sharing with people that you trust that you are having a difficult time, putting your shame and embarrassment aside, that it's not a love fest, that you actually need support, you need someone to talk to who's not your partner, who's not a baby, that's actually a really important way to kind of get your needs met. And so the other thing I think by sharing, that with Ben sharing, is that by sharing, you're also validating your own emotional experience. So rather than hiding away, rather than trying to minimize or put aside the importance of what you're going through, you're actually being more open about it. So one of the things in terms of skills that we've found to be really helpful in times of suffering is the skill of self-compassion. So it's an opportunity to sort of notice, what's my self-talk? What are my expectations of myself? Have I set the bar really high? Am I telling myself that, if I'm a really good mom, then I'll breastfeed exclusively and it'll be, and it should be easy. So you can hear that, both the expectation and the should. And unfortunately, even in my experience, that's kind of reinforced by our, care providers that, breast is best. So when you're not able to, because you don't get a latch and I pumped and nothing much happened. So then the anxiety starts to increase and we may be very hard on ourselves. So what self-compassion asks us to do is to be kind to ourselves in these times of suffering, and to also notice that we're not alone in this experience, because often we can feel very isolated, that thinking that we're the only ones who are having this difficult times. So that skill of self-compassion can be a very helpful one to learn and practice. And there's a great website, www.selfcompassion.org by Dr. Kristen Neff, that you might want to take a look at. And there's also a book called Self-Compassion for Parents, by Pollock, I think is her last name. I can't remember her first, but that'll be in the resources for you. So that one skill is very helpful. Noticing also, what am I telling myself? What's my story? Challenging those shoulds and musts and that kind of black and white thinking, having more flexible, realistic expectations. That can be really a helpful first step to just keeping things more manageable. And also notice we're in the time of COVID. We may have a vulnerability to catastrophizing anyway, but COVID, I think for all of us, has increased our vulnerability to doing that. Let's always remember that there are not just the worst possible outcomes, there are also other outcomes that are possible. And the more we can entertain all the different outcomes that are possible, I think the calmer and the more grounded that we can be. So noticing our self-talk, helping ourselves with self-compassion, sharing our experience, not being alone in it. And I think once we're able to be more kind to ourselves, what we also notice is that it gives us more space to be curious and open to our partners or our loved ones' experience. Because, if our well is kind of more full, then I think we're able to, listen in a different way. So I think the other ideas are more about more professional or formal support. The Pacific Postpartum Society offers telephone and texting support. So even if you're feeling a bit shy about connecting kind of via Zoom, that might be a good first alternative, and they offer support, I think, to partners as well. Certainly contact BC Psychological Association for individual therapy. And remember, you don't have to be in crisis to ask for help. Often when our distress is kind of at mild to moderate levels, that's when we're more able to learn new skills and practice them. And of course, always your GP is a resource, and they could, discuss with you whether a referral to the reproductive mental health program would be useful to you. So I think we can all try and remember, we're all trying to do the best that we can in this very, very uncertain time. And the more that we can build community in whatever way around us, I think that will be incredibly helpful. And also just thinking about that last question that Ben had about, will my baby not get enough socializing? Let's remember that as parents, as even interaction on Zoom, we're engaging with our babies all the time. So my hope is that we will have a solution to COVID relatively soon, and that we will have these catch-up opportunities to socialize. It's certainly not ideal, but not having the baby contact, I don't think is necessarily a detriment, but perhaps some of my colleagues can speak more to that.
Does anyone else have anything to add about the sort of psychosocial implications on babies and young infants and young children? Judy, okay.
Hi. So I think Ben's 7-month-old is probably just fine. Though babies do light up around other babies and they do enjoy it. Where it becomes more, where we know it becomes more important is when we get to the older kids, the preschool age, but particularly like kindergarten and above. And that's one of the reasons why all across Canada and all around the world, really, people have been really eager to get kids back to school so that they have that social interaction. And that's why we're being asked to do things like not go to nightclubs and have parties and things, so that we can keep the schools open for those kids so they can have the social interaction, because those are the ages where we know that it's really important. It's important for the babies and the really little and the little ones to have interaction with people. It doesn't have to be other kids. Parents and adults count too. They just need people.
Thank you, Judy. And not that I'm an expert, but for our 1 year post-transplant, we were locked down at home and we weren't allowed to have people over. It was just it's kind of exactly like we're living through right now. And I have to tell you that my daughter is now 9 and she's in grade 4, and she seems to be doing well. She's kind of a teenager, pre-teenager stage. So aside from that, she's fine. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But Rob, let's talk about women who are pregnant. You see that in your practice, you know, pregnancy is continued, babies are being born. What have you seen with the women and the parents in your practice? What are they doing to keep safe during this time?
I know I'm going to sound like a broken record because Bonnie Henry says this every single day, but it works. Wash your hands. We tell our patients, wash your hands. Just wash them whenever you see a sink, use alcohol, but just keep your hands clean. Don't touch your face. Especially don't touch your mouth, your nose, or your eyes. There was actually a study that just came out of China, I think just last week, that showed a significantly lower rate of COVID transmission in people who simply wore glasses because they were less likely to touch their eyes. They're just simple little things that you can do to avoid getting COVID. Socially distance, stay 6 feet apart from people that you don't know, wear a mask when you're in public. I'm looking out at the street now and I'm still seeing people out there without masks on, which always just amazes me. I wear a mask for 24-hour shifts straight. It doesn't bother me at all. Once you start wearing them, you get very used to them. Keep your bubble small. I think Bonnie Henry has said stick to 6, I think is the number. 6 is not very many. So 6 is maybe one of your sets of parents. Figure out which you like better, your parents or your in-laws. Pick the ones you like. A couple of friends. 6 is a small number. It's not, as my daughter thinks, 6 different people every single day. It's the same 6 people that get to enter into your bubble. This year, especially, and we've been saying this, I've been doing this job for almost a quarter of a century now, for 24 years, and always we've recommended flu shots. This year especially, please, everybody go, if you're pregnant, not pregnant, get your flu shot this year. It's extremely important. I couldn't imagine what it's going to be like to get COVID on top of influenza A. I can't imagine how devastating that would be. So please get your flu shot. In terms of the changes that we're making in our office, every office has made pretty similar changes. It's safe when you come to the office. We do ask that you come alone. Just like with Zoom presentations, we've gotten very, very good at FaceTime visits. We can actually multi-FaceTime. I've had grandparents involved in the visits, partners involved in the visits. We can turn the camera and point it at the ultrasound machine. The visits are quite easy to have your partner in some other location, but we're trying to minimize foot traffic through the office. We have very few people through the office. We have fewer doctors in the clinic every day. It's unlikely that if you see anybody in the office, another patient, they're probably just going to be somebody who you'll be distantly passing in the hallway. When you get to the hospital, that's an extremely safe place. I get asked by friends and family all the time, don't you feel frightened going to the hospital? And my answer is no, I feel frightened going to the grocery store. What I see in the hospital is people behaving properly. There's actually very few people in there. There's few visitors. When you're having your baby, your partner is allowed. They're part of the whole process. I think they get a little wristband that says EV, which is extraordinary visitor or something. They're allowed to come and go. When you come in, I would recommend that you wear a mask when you're coming into the unit, but you don't need to labor with your mask on. We will all be in your room with masks and face shields and gowns and gloves to protect us from you. I even wear an N95 for the delivery, but when you're in your room, all the rooms at St. Paul's are private. They all have their own private bathrooms. So you can, if you've had your baby, you just have this hankering for some sushi, you can still send your husband out to go get you some sushi out in the street. That's totally fine. They can come and go, but we try and minimize the amount of coming and going. But you can't have family and friends come in anymore to visit you. That's about the only difference. And you know what? There is a plus to that, to be very honest. It's nice to be able to say, oh, you just can't come. We'll see you later. Because anybody who's had a baby, and there's several in our participant group that have had babies, know how exhausting it is those first 2 days. So I think it's very safe to have a baby in COVID times, providing you just follow some basic, simple rules.
Thank you. That was really useful. Suja has something to add to that.
Actually, Elaine, I just realized that I didn't answer one of the questions that Ben posed, and that was around sleep. And I think that is the great preoccupation of every new parent. So I thought I should speak to that, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
While I think of it. So obviously we know that sleep disturbance is really common when you have a new baby because of our disrupted sleep-wake cycle due to feeding schedules. So I think what we want to remember about sleep difficulties is that it's multifactorial, so that it's can be about, you know, your body and physiology, and it can also be about psychological factors. And it may be both of those things that are in fact involved. So for example, if a parent is, you know, napping during the day, just trying to take advantage of when the baby's down to get sleep, what you might notice is that you don't have sleep drive, so that, you know, at the expected time to go to bed, which might be 11 o'clock, you're just lying there thinking, okay, so when is this going to happen? And it's not happening. So those kinds of habits and that need for like that physiological sleep drive is really important, and that can be a factor at play. The other thing, of course, are the psychological factors. And what we notice, and it's, you know, I guess the how much of a problem it is varies with individuals, is anxiety and worry. That, you know, you lie in bed and you think, oh, you know, I've worked so hard, I'm so tired, I'm just ready to, you know, sleep right now. And then it's like the worry thoughts start. And it's really hard to know how to quieten your noisy mind. So I've also provided a reference for a great book by Dr. Colleen Carney, who's a psychologist in Toronto. She's a sleep expert, and it's really about quietening your mind so that you can fall asleep. So she offers lots of great ideas as to how to manage kind of anxiety and worry thoughts so that you'll be able to have a more restorative sleep. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
That was great. Thank you, Suja. And again, tips that I think all of us can use with or without a baby. So let's talk about COVID itself. Judy, this is where I'm going to bring you in terms of the risk of COVID when it comes to infections in newborns, children. I mean, we're hearing so much information. It changes all the time. What can you tell us about the sort of current state of our knowledge?
Well, 7 months ago, I hated this question because my answer was, I don't know. But we now have half a year of data from all around the world. And the data from perspective of babies and small children is actually really good and, to my mind, pretty interesting. But then again, I find everything about kids interesting. So newborns. Can newborns get COVID? The answer is yes. Do they? Not very often, it turns out. We don't know if they can get it if you were to get sick right before you had the baby, if the baby could be born having COVID, or if they caught it from you right after birth. But it really doesn't matter, because the important thing on that, babies don't get very sick. Not even, we don't have any case reports of extremely preterm babies who have tested COVID positive, but we do have reports of born at like 32 weeks who have been found to be COVID positive, and they have done well. So that's good. The good news is it doesn't seem to make babies particularly sick. The other good news about it, and several places in the world, China and the United States being the biggest ones, initially were taking babies, if mom was COVID positive, they would take the baby away from mom. They would get mom to pump, they would give the baby breast milk, but they wouldn't let mom contact the baby. Europe, which had their big peak before we did, they kept the moms and babies together and let them breastfeed directly. They didn't find that they had significant transmission to babies. It's important to wash your hands and wear a mask when you're feeding your baby, if you're sick, or if you think you're sick, or if you know you've got COVID. But otherwise, it's business as usual. Small children, toddlers, preschool-age children, even school-age children up to about 10 to 12, they don't seem to catch COVID as much as we expected them to. I've had small children. I spent a lot of time around small children. I figured any group of people who have snot coming out of their nose and tend to wipe it on you would probably transmit infection really well. Maybe it's because they're at our knees, but they don't actually seem to. And actually, data on families that have had COVID in the household, a lot of this is out of China, but not all of it, shows that the kids are more likely to have gotten it from the adults than they are to have passed it to the adults. And there's data out of some of the Scandinavian countries that didn't close their daycares, and a lot of Europe didn't close their daycares, and even North America daycare stayed open for essential service workers. The daycare, there were occasional cases, but not nearly like what we expected. So, and the kids don't get very sick. I can tell you we have had 0 hospitalizations of children with COVID in BC. That does not mean we've had 0 cases of COVID in children. We have had cases, but they haven't been hospitalized because they haven't gotten that sick. So that's great. Once you get to the 12-year-olds and above, they're more likely to present like adults, but they still don't get as sick. We would like to think that our teenagers can distance and do that stuff, but they don't do it any better than the little kids. They just do it differently. But they can wear masks. And children over the age of 2 and above can learn to wear a mask, as can all of us. So as to how to keep yourself safe, well, it's going to sound like a broken record. Keep your bubble small, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. If you're sick, wear a mask. If you're sick and you have small kids in your life, wear a mask when you're doing up close and personal stuff with them. But know that even if they get sick, they're less likely to get very sick. And if they're snotty, they're less likely to make you sick, at least with COVID, than they are with the common cold. I think, did I get any? Did I forget?
That was great.
Okay. I think that's it. Unless anyone has any questions, I'll stop.
Perfect. Thank you. And again, if you do have questions for our panel, we are going to get to some of these questions once we get through this portion. But lastly, but not leastly, again, Andrea, I want to bring Andrea in because, of course, breastfeeding is a huge issue, and not just breastfeeding, feeding in general, but Andrea is an expert. Yes. So talk about this.
Yeah, well, the truth is that there's more than one way to feed our babies. And the hardest time to learn any of that is when you're freshly postpartum. And that goes for the first-time mom, but also other moms too that have had babies. Each baby's a little different with what they need. So really my big thing is, what can we do before our babies are here to really set us up for success? And I've said this message to lots of different people because I really believe it. And this could be taking a prenatal class, taking a breastfeeding workshop, seeking out who's going to be your tribe of people to go to really get that support. So looking at friends who maybe have similar kind of like lifestyle philosophies to you, that maybe have breastfed or fed their babies some other way, and just sort of figuring out who are your go-to people. So I know for like St. Paul's, we just started with the breastfeeding workshop. And really, it's to normalize the sort of stepping stones that come when the baby's born. And then we can recognize when there's an issue. So sometimes the normal things we feel like are a really big issue, and it stresses us out, and our partner's stressed out, and we all shut down. And it's the worst time, and it's hard, and I've been there myself too. So if we can just sort of take it back a little bit, get a lot of really good, solid information before we're having our baby, and knowing what our resources are for when we go home too. So that's a big one. Is really, and Ben was speaking to that so nicely, is that there's a disconnect right now with our community resources, and that's true. So knowing at 3 in the morning and you're exhausted and your partner's exhausted and they have to get up for work and we're having feeding problems, where do we go? So I'm going to put some really great resources that we highly recommend in the email that's going to go out after this, because I want you to have these easy resources. So maybe you didn't have time to take a prenatal class, you didn't have time to take a breastfeeding class. We still want to give you some really easy stuff to look at. And one thing, if you're in the boat of, well, I'm not having a baby, or my babies are older, you can be an amazing support person for someone who is having a baby, who is going to be home. Someone asked a question in the chat. They're like, what can I do to support my friend that's pregnant? be there for them. Ask them how things are going. Sometimes they don't want advice. Sometimes they do. So you'll have to play that one out a little bit. But I think that you could have had no kids. You could have not breastfed, whatever. Just being present and supportive is really going to go far, especially as we're in this weird time with the pandemic.
Thank you, Andrea. And again, we're getting all these great questions. We will get to them, but first we want to hear another really important personal story. I think that really resonates with people when we heard Ben's story. So we want to introduce Erin Trelor. She has been very public with her experience battling anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and panic attacks, and in particular, postpartum anxiety after one of her children was born. So Erin, talk about that experience and talk about what helped you get through some of those challenges.
Thank you, Elaine. Wow, I sound like a real handful with that introduction. All the things, right? But here's the thing. Despite having anxiety and panic attacks and having struggled with an eating disorder in high school, I'm also a totally functioning human being and an amazing mom, and I run a company and I do all these awesome things. So I just want, and the only reason I'm saying that is because I think so often we have these expectations on ourselves as parents that we will, do everything right and that we will show up in the exact way that we planned. And sometimes we don't quite hit that mark. Oftentimes we don't, but we still have to find that voice of self-compassion, as Suja said, and really practice that at all times. So there was me practicing my self-compassion. As Elaine said, I am a mom of two. I have a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. And my first experience as a parent posed challenges for sure, but was relatively uneventful. I mean, as if becoming a parent is ever uneventful, but there were no major issues. I went back to work at 6 months. I love my job. And as much as I loved having a baby, I was like, I can't stare at this small human who can't talk to me all day long. I'm dying of boredom here. If I don't go back to work, I'm going to become depressed. So back to work I went, and when James was a year old, we started trying for baby number 2. I had 2 miscarriages, and kept busy with work, kept busy as a mom, didn't take a lot of time to process it, just kept trucking along as we so often do, got pregnant again, and this time was like, I remembered that feeling that I had in those early months of having a baby, of being a little stir crazy. And so I decided I'm going back to work after 3 months. And this is an interesting sort of space that so many of us as mothers are in right now, where we have careers that we love, where there's more opportunity for us than ever before. And right when you're at this place where potentially your career's building and growing, you get pregnant and you have a baby who you love with all your heart more than anything in the world. But that doesn't mean that you don't miss that other thing that you've been working on. It doesn't mean that you're, ready to just completely give that up. And you watch your husband going out the door every morning off to build his career and, do his thing. And I mean, for me, I'll only speak to my experience. I had moments of being so jealous that he got to go to work and I was left at home. So jealous. And yet, this is the confusing part. At the same time, I didn't want to leave my babies. I wanted to be the one who was kissing their owies when they got hurt. I wanted to be the one who was dropping them off at preschool. I wanted, it broke my heart when we eventually got childcare. This is the dilemma of the modern day mother and father, I think, but there's always a little bit of a feeling of conflict. We're busier than ever right now, navigating our careers, these expectations that we have as to how we show up as parents. We have this whole world of social media that's showing us beautiful Pinterest lunches and how our homes should look and how we should, show up at the door smiling when our partner arrives home. There's so many expectations that are being placed on us, and we're, on our devices that are constantly notifying us of things. There's so much going on. I have always been somebody who's pretty driven, who's had high expectations of myself. I'm sure there are others who are listening right now who feel the same. And so I was very frustrated when about 3 months into work, I felt like there was a hole in my brain. I couldn't remember things that, I'd be mid-conversation and all of a sudden I could not remember what the heck it was that I was saying. And people would laugh and say, oh, that's just motherhood. Nobody can remember. We don't remember what we're saying anymore. We don't remember where we put our keys. That's just normal. And I'd be sitting there working and I'd be, putting together a presentation and I literally couldn't find the words in my mind. But I thought, that's just normal. That happens to everyone. Sleep deprivation and, I'm working and dropping James off and breastfeeding and trying to find some time for Scott and I to keep our marriage alive and all of these things. It's fine if I'm losing my memory. And then one day I noticed a patch right here as I was breastfeeding. And I was like, oh, that's strange. I've got a rash. But like moms, we don't have time to go to the doctor to check out those things, right? We're dealing with 100 things. So for 3 weeks, this rash just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and like itchier. And I was like, God, this is a pain. I'm putting eczema cream on it from the drugstore. I finally, was like, actually, I think I'm feeling run down. I will go in and talk to a doctor. And it turns out I had shingles. But I still didn't stop. I put on the cream and I took the medication and I kept going to work and we kept trying to juggle everything. We started doing renovations on our home. And I'm a health coach. I work with women specifically teaching them how to listen to their body so that they can be their happiest, healthiest selves. And what was I doing in this moment? Anything but listening to my body. I mean, I was ignoring every sign and symptom that started to come. The anxiety that was coming up, the shingles, the memory loss, the loss of appetite. I started losing weight. I wasn't hungry. I mean, the signs and symptoms were all there. But I didn't have a panel like this and nobody was talking about warning signs for postpartum. Plus, I was through that 3-month baby blues period that we all hear about. So I thought I was good to go. There just weren't the conversations like this one that were available. So I didn't see the signs. I was driving one day and a thought popped into my head. I was listening to a podcast that perhaps I wasn't supposed to be a mom. Perhaps I was not supposed to be a mother. And I remember still like feeling this sense of calm wash over me. And I was like, oh my God, that's my intuition. It's telling me that I am not supposed to be a mom, that this was never supposed to be my thing. I should have done my career. I didn't, I'm in the wrong spot. These kids don't need me. And the thought seemed so real and so practical and so, I truly believed it. And it caused my first panic attack. So I had a full panic attack. I'd never had one before, didn't really know what was happening. And for anyone who's had a panic attack, it feels like your whole body's on fire. You can't breathe. You're shaking. Your body's in the most intense fight or flight response possible. And after it passes, it's drained everything out of you. But again, we're moms, so we can't worry about ourselves, right? You just got to keep going. You got dinner to make. There's diapers to change and bedtime to do. So we carry on. But the panic attacks kept coming and they started happening more and more. And those thoughts, which I've since learned are called intrusive thoughts, started presenting themselves more and more frequently. And my body was having a physical reaction to those thoughts. My body was saying like, no, those thoughts aren't right. But it felt right. And for the first time in my life, I could understand the mother who takes her life or who walks away from her family, which was something I never could have understood before, but that's how awful postpartum can get. And I'm somebody who my whole life has wanted to be a mom and whose kids, like now that I'm out of it, they're my world and my greatest joy and my inspiration. And so the reason I'm talking about it, even though it's hard to be this honest and vulnerable, is because I don't want any other woman to miss the signs. This type of thing is so easy to catch. It is so easy to get help with. It's not you. you're depleted, you're exhausted. You know, there's so many simple steps that you can take to get support so that it doesn't feel that hard. And you are the perfect mother and the perfect father for your child. You really are all that they need. But in order for you to show up as the best parent, we have to remember to take time to fill our own cup. We have to remember that if we're not looking after ourselves at some level, we're not able to look after our babies. And your body and mind will continue to give you little signs that things aren't working until you start listening. So my request today is that, you know, for anybody, whether you're thinking about having a baby or you're already there, it's to remember that you're not alone in the highs and lows. And it's to remember that you can have all the positive feelings about being a mother, and you can still find it really effing hard sometimes. You can do the meditation and eat the like whole foods and get the acupuncture, all the things that I did at first, and then take the medication if that's what you need. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you less than. I really held off on taking medication for the anxiety because I thought it made me weak. I thought I can't be a health coach if I have to take medication. I should be able to like do the exercise and eat the foods and do the meditation and get myself out of this. And I dug myself further into the pit. Medication, in some instances, is just another tool in our toolkit. And it doesn't make you weak to take it. It makes you strong if that's what you need. It allows you to get back to a certain level so that you can start implementing all of those other things. I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing it by any means. I just want you to know that if you have to take it, if you need it to lean on it, if you need to like check out of your house for a weekend and just go do a little TLC for yourself, then you go do that at any time because you deserve it and you're worthy of it. And this is a big transition and a big change, becoming a mother, becoming a father. I loved it. I was listening to a podcast this week with a man named Peter Crone, who's known as the mind architect. And he says, we have this archetype of what a mom and dad should be, right? Think right now for yourself. Like how did you imagine yourself showing up as a mom and dad? What were your expectations of what a mom and dad would be? And then at the end of the day, though, it's really just Diane and Bob with their baggage and their own trauma and their own, Bob and Diane have no effing idea what they're doing out there. They're doing their best, and that's okay. That's okay. It's Erin and Scott. It's you and your husband. You're just figuring it out.
Wow. Thank you, Erin. That was really powerful. And I think, again, you know, all of these conversations we've been having resonate with so many people on so many levels. And you know what? I mean, I've got the 9-year-old, the 4-year-old. I just went to the library and I have a stack of parenting books next to my bed, you know, how to discipline without yelling and various tools that, you know, again, I think as a parent, your learning never, ever stops. And there is no right way or wrong way. There's just what works for you. So thank you so much, Erin. I think we've got a lot of really, really great questions from our attendees. So let's jump in. You guys have seen that you can upvote certain questions. So I'm going to go the top of the list, so the most popular questions, and then we'll try and get through as many as we can. I'm going to ask the panelists, you know, some of these I think will be specific to some particular panelists, but feel free to jump in. This one says, I really connect with Ben's story. I'm also concerned with introducing my baby to other children, but I do want them to have social interactions. Do Zoom calls with my children and other children provide that social interaction needed? What about play? And I think there was another question related about the whole idea of screen time. Obviously, we're all getting a lot more screen time than we normally would, adults and kids. So what do you guys have to say about that? You know, good, bad? Is it as good? You know, are there other ways to introduce some of that social interaction? Who wants to jump in? Judy, Suja, Andrea? Okay, Judy. Judy's going to take it.
Go with Judy.
She's saying no. No, Judy. Okay. Suja, do you want to step in here? Oh, Suja, we need you to unmute.
Yes, thank you for the prompt. Yeah, I think, my best thought that I can offer, which is not very helpful, is that we just don't know. I think we're all in a big time of experimenting with how to connect, and of course, how to offer babies and children opportunities to connect. And I think as, parents, we're always trying to find that balance, right? I think Ben noticed in, his relationship that, his wife is more risk averse than he is. So we even have that dimension of trying to navigate. So how do we come to some kind of an agreement about how to interact, even as adults, let alone with the babies? Now, it sounds like from what Judy shared that the risk to babies is low. So perhaps if there are more opportunities moving forward for meetup groups so that there can be some physically distanced opportunities for babies to see each other and play, and then everyone's doing their masks and hand washing and such, that we can have those chances. But I think we're being asked a lot right now, which is tolerating our uncertainty and being really patient and kind with ourselves and kind with each other. Because I do think that, perhaps maybe, in a more Western world, we're used to getting what we need and want quickly. And so, I think I always try and remind myself, if I were in India, it would be a very different ballgame. And so maybe we can temper our expectations and trust that whatever opportunities that we can find and that we can look for, we can step through that as is comfortable for our own relationship, for our family. I think that's as much as I can say about this.
I mean, I think those are all totally good points. And I really feel like the kids, they want to be with us. And even though we need our breaks occasionally, they really do get a lot from us. And so thinking we need to have these amazing, elaborate days like we maybe did in the past, where we had play dates that were organized and themed. The truth is, I think really kids benefit a lot from being with their parents. So if there's a good balance of being present with our kids, even in really small increments, so we can be, a little sane here, and give them that face time they want, that we can find a good balance there. And then, I mean, the West Coast, we are able to go outside in the rain as well. There's lots of, tramping around the forest that kids are doing with other kids at distance. So there's small things that we can keep safely, and then changing our expectations, just like you were saying. I think that's a really big one.
Judy, I think you also had something to add here.
Yeah, no, I wanted Andrea to talk, because Andrea is can I say kick-ass mom on this? Is that allowed?
I like that.
Of 3 gorgeous kids. I mean, I have two obnoxious teenagers who roll their eyes at me, but they're pretty awesome too. But yeah, you don't have to lock yourselves away in your house and stay away from all humanity. Going outside for a walk in the paddle jumping is great. Going outside for a walk regardless of the weather. But small children in particular, they need interaction from their tribe, their grown-ups, any adults in your bubble, any kids in your bubble if you have them. But they are going to be okay. There is a concept, I know Suja probably knows a lot more about this than I do, the concept of the good enough parent. Good enough parenting. You don't have to provide perfect anything. You just have to provide enough, and enough attention, a roof over the, roof, safe place, food, but enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. And speaking to what Erin was talking about, but we all have these expectations that we're going to be able to do this, and we're going to be like perfect at that. And none of us can meet those expectations, particularly not in the Instagram, Pinterest era.
Yeah.
But the idea that your kids will get enough, go through your days, get supports you need. In this day, right now with COVID, have as many of those supports be remote. If you've got grandparents, vulnerable people whose bubbles are way too big that you want your kids to see, but you don't want them to be exposed to, well, you either meet them outside with everybody masking. Little kids, by the way, are terrible at social distancing because they want to run up and grab you around the knees, though knees are better than faces, so that's good, I guess. That's where Zoom comes in, or FaceTime. So pre-COVID, I would have said, so the Canadian Pediatric Society says no screens before the age of 2. If you ask me if my children used a screen before the age of 2, the answer is, oh my God, yes, because I would have lost my mind. There were moments where the big thing that the research shows is that putting your child in front of a screen of incessant nonsense, which I don't know if you've ever had to watch Caillou.
I knew you were going to say that.
My kids are old, so that's, Paw Patrol. It's all cute, but if you're sitting there with your kid watching it and you're interacting with them about it, that makes it a lot better. And if sometimes you need them to watch something on YouTube so that you can have a work conversation or talk to your doctor or your counselor on the phone, that is okay. I am a pediatrician. I am giving you permission. This is about balance, right? But remember, good enough. We don't have to be perfect. That's not what we should aim for.
Suja wants to add something here. Thank you, Judy. I can't agree with Judy more. I think that we have so moved away in our culture because we're in this comparing and competing kind of environment with our Insta lives and Facebook lives, etc., that we've forgotten that not that long ago, our parents had to work a lot. If you were 12, you were looking after the younger siblings. You're probably watching TV and eating Cocoa Pops. And no one died. I even got, a PhD, lo and behold. So good things can happen. And I think that idea of being a good enough parent is a really important one, and really thinking about, what matters to all of us. I think it's that idea of emotional validation that I raised earlier with when Ben talked about his experience, that the more we can, if we can connect and listen and hear our children's needs, and obviously as infants, they're pretty basic. I think those are actually much more helpful predictors of good outcomes for our kids, rather than did they get enough, playtime. And I'm not saying that that's not fun and important, but let's remember that, attachment is a really important aspect of psychological growth and development. And them spending, meaningful time with us, whatever that looks like, I think that is going to matter a lot.
Well, my 2 kids are watching television right now, so I can be here with you. My husband's working, and so that is the reality of, I think, life, and not just pandemic times, but life in general. So thank you. I think that was really, really great insight. Let's move on to our next question. This one says, I have a 1-year-old, lost my job when COVID began. I'm stressed financially, which is unfortunately the reality for many people right now. I catch myself when that stress translates into my parenting. Please, any tips you can provide for managing stress would be so helpful. So, how do you stop yourself from taking a bad day, a long day on whatever you have to be focused on as an adult, and not bring it home and impact your parenting, and not yell at your kids? And we've all done it, right? But how can you control yourself and manage that anxiety? Suja?
First of all, I just wanted to say to the person who's, asked this question, what an incredibly difficult time. I mean, already with isolation, and then being worried about making ends meet, and then, having the needs of children, that's a lot. And I think that would overwhelm any one of us, on this panel and in the audience. So again, that idea of being kind to yourself, I think I can't emphasize how important that is. I think that, whatever we can do to slow ourselves down, because I think when we have a lot of stress, our minds kind of function like bullet trains, like they're just moving so fast. They're trying to anticipate, what if this happens? What if that happens? And then what if this happens? And we write kind of stories and scenarios that pull us away from being in the present moment. And when we're pulled away with that anxiety train, then I think we're much more vulnerable to having that stress, having that distress manifest itself in, impatience, anger, all of those things that, we don't necessarily want to, have or feel when we're around our kids. Now, that said, I also want us to be super realistic. I mean, if any of you had a parent who was never, angry or lost their temper at you, please tell me, because that would be a unique experience. So let's also be, super realistic. We all lose our cool. And again, I want to go back to this idea of validation and taking responsibility. So you can lose your cool and apologize. Doing that repair actually helps again with that psychological wellness, because they can trust you. They can trust you because when you say, that was on me, and repair, then they know that you're someone who might have, had a bad day, but you will take responsibility for what's not theirs. So that might be something to consider. And then those ideas in terms of managing the stress. So whatever can help you be in the present moment. So if it's distraction things, if it's, soothing or comforting things, like if you can grab a few minutes to have a bath, to write down the things that you're worried about, maybe schedule worry time so that it's not sort of expanding all through your day. Those are the kinds of strategies that we'd suggest as psychologists to help you. If you find that your anxiety, and I'm sort of conceptualizing this as anxiety, and that may not be all of what it is, but Anxiety Canada is a website that could be very helpful for you. It has lots of self-help strategies and tools, including meditation practice, progressive muscle relaxation, those kinds of things that could be helpful. And again, I encourage everyone, please don't be alone in your distress, whether it's seeking a friend or a family doctor or any of the support services that we've talked about. I think that could be very helpful. As Erin so eloquently talked about, what we really don't want you guys to be in the position is of feeling so desperate that it feels like you're in a cul-de-sac, that there are no options, because there are. And all of us, would really want you to get the help and support that you need. And I think that there are really capable people in the community and professionals who I know would want to have you not feel quite so alone with your distress.
Thank you, Suja. We got a couple of sort of medical questions. I think let's tackle those. I think this might be sort of Judy's field of expertise. So one of them is about multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children and its linkage to COVID. I think you guys probably heard a lot about this in the news recently. So Judy, what can you tell us about what we actually know and what's happening in BC at this stage?
Okay, well, I actually can putting it in my stuff, and I was like, I'm just going to leave that out for now. So not because it's not important, but because so far in BC we have had 0 cases of MIS-C, which stands for multisystem inflammatory syndrome related to COVID-19. It presents very much like some inflammatory syndromes we see related to other viruses, often under the sort of the umbrella diagnosis of Kawasaki's disease. As pediatricians, we're trained to look for these things. We are trained to recognize these things. We have been, because we started hearing about it in the world literature, they sort of set up a monitoring process for BC Children's Hospital, and we're still waiting for a case, which is great. So what we know about it, which isn't huge, I will admit, but what we know about inflammatory conditions associated with viral infections is that we do have treatments for them. They can present in a multitude of different ways, but mostly prolonged fevers, rashes, joint swelling, joint pain, things like that. There is in the literature, there are a couple of cases reported in the world literature, like literally 2 that I've read, where the kids have been profoundly sick. There have been a lot more of the cases that have been reported, and there's a huge series out of New York City from their spring events, where most of the kids were mildly to moderately sick. But it's one of those things that is unpredictable. It still seems to be extremely rare with COVID. We have internationally, what are we up to? 6 million COVID cases. A big chunk of them in kids, more in adults than in kids, but in a world where probably at least 1.5 million, 2 million kids have been shown to be COVID positive, we've had less than 100 of these cases. So these are not common. If your child had COVID, or you thought your child had COVID, and then they were in the days or a week or two or afterwards were to show up with fevers or joint pains or funny things, call your physician. Like I said, everybody's on the lookout for this. We don't want to miss it. Everybody is watching. So it's something to put on the really unlikely to happen. People know about it. If something happens, we're going to get help. Okay. I don't want people to worry too much.
Judy, can you just clarify, because I know that Dr. Bonnie Henry had said recently that there were 8 suspected cases of this inflammatory syndrome, but not linked to COVID, but they're going into the database. I think that's where people get really scared and confused.
So, because like I said, we see these kind of inflammatory things, they're not common with any virus, and they can happen. If you look at the list of what can cause this, it's about 2 pages long. Which is why I don't bother memorizing, because I can rattle off about 15 possible causes and then I start getting into the weeds. There have been 8 cases of kids showing up at BC Children's with these kind of inflammatory problems, but that's not, we see kids with these on an ongoing basis year over year. So this isn't something specific to COVID. The COVID kids in the literature are presenting slightly differently. So we're casting a slightly wider net. We typically have a very small list of things you have to show up with where to make the diagnosis, because it's a clinical diagnosis of these inflammatory things. With COVID cases, we've added a couple of other categories. Probably there's some other categories we should add for some of the other viral causes too. So this is a viral associated thing. It's not a COVID specific. But it's still really rare. And we're watching.
Thank you for clarifying that. One more medical related question that I think is a really good one. What about holding babies after they're born for family members, not obviously parents, but the other family members? How can you do this safely? Should they wear a mask? Can they even do it? When should they not be holding the baby? I mean, this also goes to hugging. We kind of alluded to the whole hugging thing. I've read different things of you can hug like this with your face facing away from the kid or whatever. So what insight do you have on hugging and holding babies?
Okay, aren't babies wonderful to hold? My favorite part of my job is holding babies. Andrea knows this because I did this with her babies. So hugging, let's talk holding babies. I'll get to hugging in a minute. Who should hold the baby? Mom and dad should hold the baby. If mom and dad have a cold or respiratory symptoms, they should mask, wash their hands, and hold the baby. Other family members, are they in your bubble? And are they being safe on the outside? And are they vaccinated? Which means we're getting into fall. Flu shots, everybody, please. Who should be around your baby holding them closely? Preferably somebody who's had their whooping cough booster as well. If they're not people who are in your intimate bubble, if they're not your safe 6, who you're around unmasked on an ongoing basis, please have them mask, wash their hands. The fewer people, the better. Partially because we each have our bubble. And so if you have somebody who's not in your safe 6, they're going out and being with other people. And even the people in your safe 6 who don't live under your roof are doing things where you don't know what they're doing, and they're being exposed to people. So people who are not going out and doing as much, grandparents who aren't working anymore are awesome as long as they're not going out and, I don't know, playing mahjong and having tea with their friends. Oh, did I mention my mother-in-law? She's awesome, by the way, but actually she's being really good. They're playing Zoom mahjong now. But people who are being safe. But this is not the time to have big parties where you're passing your babies around. I actually often tell parents who are going home from nursery, much like you were told, Elaine, stay home in the winter. Don't let anyone through your door if they have a sniffly nose. Can't spray them with hand sanitizer. Put them in a mask. If they're a smoker, get them to put a shirt on over or take off their overshirt. But fewer people is better. But please hug your own babies. If you have people in your safe 6 who are behaving and not sick, they can hug your babies. Washing hands and masking first is best. From a hugging point of view, this is a tough one. Hug the people in your household, absolutely. anyone else, the guidance around the world is completely all over the place from public health. And I think that speaks to the fact that we don't completely know. Masked is always better than unmasked. Masked and hand washed, absolutely. Facing away from each other when possible. But who wants to face away from your baby? So if you have people in your life you want to introduce to your baby where you're not sure they're being safe or you're pretty sure they're not, introduce them on FaceTime, please.
Oh, sorry, I was having mute problems. Thank you. That was really, really great. Okay, I think we've got a really important question that, I think it's gone, but I still remember what it was. It was about if you have a friend or someone you know and love in your circle who you feel like might be exhibiting symptoms of postpartum or starting to go in that direction, what advice can we offer to people who see someone in their circle facing this?
I just think that it's amazing that that friend even recognizes that. So I wrote them back, which is why it disappeared to you. But I just said, like, that's amazing that you can recognize this in your friend, and just being able to acknowledge to them the work that they're doing in this part of their life is going to be, for me, I think, a first step. But maybe Suja could talk more about that.
Oops. Yeah, I really liked your answer, Andrea, that I read, and I think that there are ways probably to approach people that allows for more openness. So really think about how your language and your tone when you're approaching someone, which I'm sure if, as Andrea points out, if this friend was thoughtful enough to notice that her friend was struggling, then I imagine they're already giving a lot of thought to how they would approach. So something like, how are you doing? I wonder if you need, any support or help, and would my help alone be enough, or would you need, any more support than that? So something, and that's not even that kind of a most eloquent way of bringing it forward, but I hope what you heard was willingness, kind of tentativeness, not naming or labeling what you believe the problem is, but allowing that person to say to you what they need and what they might want for support. So the first step might be them just being able to say to you, just having someone to talk to or spend time with. And then as that goes on, if you are noticing more grave concerns, obviously if they're expressing thoughts of, harming themselves or those kinds of things, then you may want to be more explicit about what your concerns are, and always being side by side, offering that support. How can I help you reach out to that support? You needn't be alone in that. And so that might be kind of first steps to try. But maybe Erin, you've got some thoughts about, Rob.
I think Rob has something to offer here.
Well, no, I just wanted to say that we do screen our patients in their pregnancy, usually around 28 weeks, with a Edinburgh peripartum depression scale, and it usually picks out people that we're concerned about, and if they get a score, we have fantastic resources in this city to help with this. And then we screen the patients when they come in for their postpartum visit. Now, sometimes symptoms may appear after that, or we have patients that are maybe borderline on the EPDS, and I usually talk to the partner and say, just watch for signs and just give us a call if you've got any concerns, because it really is very easy for us to set up a referral through the support systems that we have. And so if somebody has a friend, maybe it might be difficult to speak directly to the person who's suffering from postpartum depression. And as Erin said, sometimes they hide it. You don't want to look like you're struggling with that. So maybe just approach their partner, who can then phone the caregiver, the midwife, the obstetrician, the family doctor, who can then provide some help.
Thank you. And Erin, do you have anything to add?
I'm somebody who's an oversharer, and I'm always very open. And so I had people who sat me down at various times and just gently said, this is in particular my mom, we think you're maybe doing too much, and are you feeling okay? Yes, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. So I think opening the door for those conversations, recognizing that when you bring it up at first, there might be resistance or denial, or maybe they're just not ready to talk about it. But I can tell you that the first person I called when I needed help was my mom. And that's partly because she had already reached out, had already, started asking the questions. So yeah, I think, sometimes we're just so afraid to be honest and to ask questions. And I think if it's done with the right language and the tone, as Suja said, then, and it's coming from a caring place, then it never hurts. It never hurts to ask.
Great. Thank you. We are rapidly running out of time, guys. It's been an amazing conversation. We still have some really great questions. I'm going to make a promise now on behalf of our panelists that we will answer those questions that we can and submit and send them off to everybody afterwards as part of the post follow-up. But just really, really quickly, I want all our panelists to just, offer one sort of line, one final thought. Rob, let's start with you.
Well, as a parent of two kids who are now growing up, 30 and 27, being a parent is the best job. It's the hardest job you'll ever do, but it's the best job in the world. So I wholeheartedly endorse being a parent.
Great, thank you. What about you, Andrea?
I'm going to say on those days where you feel like you're not doing enough, when you're working from home and you have kids at home, take 10 minutes, get onto their level and just be in that 10 minutes. They're going to fill their bucket and then you can go back to whatever you need and feel good.
Thank you. That's great advice. And Erin, how about from you?
I would like to echo what Dr. Anderson said, which is being a parent truly is one of the greatest gifts that you can have. And that despite the hardship and despite those moments when you think you're going to break, being a parent really builds you into, for a lot of us, that person that we want to become.
Thank you. Suja?
I think I'll just say what I've tried to thread through a conversation today is be kind to yourself. Enjoy what you can. And I think we're all struggling with accepting what is, which is COVID and all the challenges that it's presented. But I can just see the benefit in sharing and being open. And I hope as a result of listening to our conversation today, that it encourages more people to do exactly that.
Thank you, Suja. And finally, Judy.
I'm a talkative. Short is hard. I would say COVID has brought up a whole lot of things that we probably have all been dealing with in bits and pieces. Childcare issues. And what about when kids are sick? How do we keep people safe? Am I a good enough parent? How do I do it all? Are my kids going to be okay? COVID in kids, from everything we know so far, which is only 6 months worth, so I'm not giving written guarantees here, but so far it seems like from a physical health point of view, the kids are okay. From a mental health point of view, the kids are okay. Remember, good enough parenting.
Perfect.
Good enough parenting. Parenting is awesome. And for those people who said were worried about being a parent and having a career, it's crazy and it's insane, and it made me a better doctor. And doctoring is a nice break from parenting, and parenting is a great break from doctoring. And it gets better as the kids get older, except they roll their eyes a lot more and get much more sarcastic. And that's all I have to say.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Sorry, Jen. I'm giving it back to you. We are a few minutes late, so hopefully we haven't impinged too much on everyone's evening. But again, thank you to all our amazing panelists.
Hi again, everybody. Wow, thank you. On behalf of the St. Paul's Future Leaders, I just wanted to express our deepest appreciation for our panelists, and especially Erin and Ben for sharing your personal stories. I think based on the comments, they resonated so powerfully with people. Really, they had the most remarks when you were speaking, and so thank you so much. We also want to thank the Kiefer Bar, of course, for kicking off the spirit of today's webinar, and of course Elaine for your expert moderation. Just so happy with the level of engagement. So thank you, everybody, and of course to all of our participants, thank you for taking an hour and a half out of your life to join us today. We are also appreciative of your ongoing support. And we're here, you know, that there is in fact a transition to parenthood, as we referenced at the beginning. There's highs and lows and everything in between. I actually agree. The final comments, I think being a parent is pretty much the coolest thing ever. So fortunate, and I feel so personally blessed. We hope that today that you feel inspired by what you've heard and have left with a little bit of information in your back pocket, not to mention a few cocktail tips, of course. If you would like to make a donation to our Billy Rubin meter, to our efforts to fundraise, you can see the information on the screen, donate.helpstpauls.com/future leaders maternity. We'd greatly appreciate it. And we are going to log off just momentarily here, but we are going to, as soon as we log off, we're going to do the raffle for the amazing door prizes. Again, a huge thank you to the sponsors that are displayed there on the screen. We really couldn't have done it without you, and thank you so much for your generous contributions to us. If you choose to continue to engage in conversations with us, I just wanted to make a note that the St. Paul's Innovation Series is continuing on October 5th. Compassion and Innovation in Healthcare is the next title, and it's an event that's focused on exploring patient-centered care. So again, thank you to everybody. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. And in the spirit of Dr. Bonnie, be calm, be kind, and be safe.